Hello, HM Sheep. You know me. I'm Dr. Dan Do. Now, looky here. I want to let you know that the last thing you should be doing is going to patreon.com/HMP and helping out this podcast. It's a form of welfare, and welfare is communism. You don't want to end up like those Jags that Patrick Swayze had to kill in Red Dawn, do you? I mean, sure, you'll get an extra bonus podcast each month, be an executive producer, or even get an exclusive t-shirt, but why? These guys are a bunch of lazy, shiftless morons with nothing to recommend them. They also refuse to bend their show to my will and turn it into a full hour-long discussion of why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should be our national television show. So whatever you do, don't go to patreon.com/HMP and throw your hard-earned money their way. It only helps keep this monstrosity of a podcast on the internet. And as Mama Do always said, she said to me, "You've always been a disappointment, Dr. Dan Do, and I cry myself to sleep every night." But she also said, "You only ever look out for number one." I'm Dr. Dan Do. Burn in Hades!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. My name is Adam Portrais, and I'm joined, as always, by Sean Keenan.
Heidi doesn't even know who Hal Sparks is.
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and Rosemary Harris is looking fine as ever.
Indeed, she is. Guys, we are back yet again for a lovely, lovely Patreon pick for you. Every single month, we ask our people that support us over at patreon.com/HMP to vote on a movie that we watch. And this week, they have chosen for us Spider-Man 3. Now, on this show, we've actually covered Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 actually very recently. And so they said, hey, man, we want you to finish up that Sam Raimi trifecta there. And, we decided, hey, since they told us to and they're our bosses, that's what we're going to do, right?
Exactly. You're learning, finally, Adam. You're learning.
Sometimes you have to give the people what they want. And now, if you'd like to be one of those people that could tell us all the things to do, jump over to patreon.com/HMP. Cool part about that is depending upon what level you get, man, you can get the early show, the pre-show, the post-show. I've got a couple ideas for little random extra special shows that you'll get because guess what? You get your own RSS feed. You don't go along with all the main people. You know what I'm saying? You get your own thing. It uploads to your little podcatcher of choice there, be it Apple or Android, whatever you got, and it downloads you those special episodes just for you because you're special. Every single one of you, very, very special.
It's nice to feel special.
It is. Now, and since it is their special day, I do want to recognize some of these people because they are awesome. And you know what? We don't have too awful many people, so I'm just going to run through them here real quick here. The people down at the $1 level, many of them have been along with us for quite some time. We got Lauren Carroll, we got Steve Marshall, and then Oops Comic Adventure. By the way, if you want to, get your name on something, this is a real cheap and easy way to do it. So, Oops Comic Adventure. There you go. Then, of course, over at the $2 level, Evan, Apollonius, Lewis, Lee, you guys are awesome. They get the show a little bit early. Now, this is the big one. This is where the majority of people lie because it's the most awesome level for the bang for your buck there. It's the $5 level. We got Bo, Warren, Khalil, Bill, Marcus, Mike, Tim, Krissa, Eric, Brian, Edward, Derek, Greg, Kevin, Mike, Robert, Gorgon, and Marlon. You guys, those guys are so awesome. The $5 is where, kind of the meat and potatoes of all the Patreon people are. But, of course, the big dogs, the executives of the entire thing here. We got Matt, Jim, Beverly, Alex, Robert, RocketFace, and Jeff. You guys, seriously, thank you to every single one of you guys. You're what helps keep this show going. And the nice part is like shows like today, you give back to us and let us know, hey, this is what we kind of are digging on, and that's why we're here for you, man. So thank you for all of that. And like I said, if you want to be part of that crew, head on down to patreon.com/HMP today and we'd really appreciate it. Speaking of things we appreciate, we also appreciate it when everyone goes down to iTunes, drops us a 5-star review, a.k.a. Humdinger. And I got...
Wow.
That's a dark one. We got a special one today because while the last Humdinger that we read was our 100th review, thanks to the glorious Dr. Dan Dew, this is our 100th 5-star review. And it's entitled, I'm going to read it like it's written, Humdinger. And it's by Mike W. Thanks, guys, so much for bringing these amazing reviews every week. Bruce, the comic book connections are in-depth and incredibly insightful. Sean, it goes without saying that Heidi loves the Stallone connection. And Adam, yeah, you're okay, too. Just kidding, you're awesome, too. Thanks for being the linchpin and organizing the show. You guys have great chemistry, or synergy, rather, and provide such great enthusiasm for movies I really love. Thanks so much, and keep up the Humdinger work. That's from Mike W. Mike W., thank you, sir, for that 5-star review on iTunes. Our 100th 5-star review, a.k.a. Humdinger.
Humdinger.
And if you'd like to go out and do that too, man, be a part of the fun. It helps us kind of get other people to go, I'm interested in that thing. I'd like to see that. So, we appreciate it, man. All right. Well, like I said, Spider-Man 3 is what our patrons have voted on this week. So why don't we go ahead and take a listen to the trailer for Spider-Man 3?
Ask MJ to marry me.
A man has to put his wife before himself. Can you do that, Peter?
Yeah, I think I can.
We have some new information. This is your uncle's actual killer. We lost his trail 2 days ago.
This man killed my uncle, and he's still out there.
Everybody needs help sometimes, Peter. Even Spider-Man.
Revenge is like a poison. It can take us over. And before you know it, can turn you into something ugly.
The suit. Where'd this come from? The power. It feels good. But you lose yourself to it.
Whoa!
Spidey, love the new outfit.
Remember Ben Parker?
What does it matter to you anyway?
Everything!
Do you want to push me away?
Why would I want to push you away? I love you.
You knew this was coming, Pete.
What's happening?
I don't know.
We've all done terrible things to each other, but we have to forgive each other, or everything we ever were will mean nothing.
I need your help. I have to stop it.
This could be the end of Spider-Man.
All right, that was the trailer for Spider-Man 3, our retro review of this week. Here is the IMDb plotline. As we know, IMDb always 100% correct in everything they say and or do. A strange black entity from another world bonds with Peter Parker and causes inner turmoil as he contends with new villains, temptations, and revenge. This is directed by Sam Raimi, written by Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi, from a screenplay initially by Alan Sargent. Starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Thomas Hayden Church, Topher Grace, Bryce Dallas Howard, Rosemary Harris, J.K. Simmons, James Cromwell, and more. And we need to get on down to it. Bruce, what is our comic book connection this week, sir?
I'm waiting for that music.
I planned everything out, and that's the one bloody thing that I did not. I have all my windows open, and it's the one thing that's not there. Darn it! I knew.
Want me to just go with it?
Go with it. We'll close it out with that.
Okay. Well, Flint Marko is the Sandman. And I just want to go on record that Sandman is the most overused and confusing name in comics. DC alone has at least 3 different characters called Sandman. There's the Golden Age guy that wears a gas mask. There's the Kirby-esque pseudo-futuristic one. And, of course, Neil Gaiman's lead singer of The Cure is perhaps the best known. But I'm talking about Marvel's Sandman, the one who has the same last name as the Juggernaut, though I'm pretty sure they're not related. He first showed up in 1963, making him like the 3rd supervillain that Spidey ever faced. And his name says a lot about him, because he can turn his body into sand. Now, throughout his run in the comics, he's not been a straight-up bad guy. He's been more morally ambiguous. Roy Thomas said, "I've been pleased to see Sandman's gradual redemption, whose seeds perhaps I helped plant in the stories. He just seemed to me like a character who might have that in him." Now, his birth name is William, and when he was 3 years old, his father left home and abandoned him and his mother. In those early years, his mom would take him to the Coney Island beach where he would just happily play in sandcastles. A little foreshadowing, if you will. And his sand sculpture ability is a craft that he used in secondary school under the encouragement of his teacher and first ever crush, Miss Flint. Now, he uses Miss Flint as inspiration for his alias, you see. And then he goes on to become pretty good as a football player. But he slugs his coach and gets kicked off the team, leading to a life of crime. Because, you know, there's only 2 choices in life. Great football player or criminal, nowhere in between, right?
Right.
Well, Flint goes to prison, meets his biological father, who's a fellow inmate, then escapes. He flees to a nuclear testing site on a beach near Savannah, Georgia, where he comes into contact with sand that has been irradiated by an experimental reactor. His body and the radioactive sand bond, changing Marko's molecular structure into sand. And how do you think the Savannah Board of Tourism feels about that story? Now, the first time he battles Spider-Man defeats Marko with a vacuum cleaner. That's not a lie. It's not a joke. Spider-Man uses a vacuum cleaner to suck up all the sand and then hands it over to the police, and that had to be humiliating. Spider-Man defeats him a second time by being able to hold his breath longer than Flint, and so far these battles all sound like lesser episodes of the Flintstones. Now, at the urging of the Thing, Marko decides to turn his life around and try to do some good. After teaming up with Spider-Man, Doc Ock convinces him to rejoin the Sinister Six, but fear not, he turns on the bad guys and saves the day. His story kind of goes on like that, vacillating between good and bad, showing that having the innate powers of kitty litter can be a tough burden to bear.
And that was...
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
You want to know what the funny part is I put that on the desktop there to be played at all times, and yet I forgot that it was there because it was super convenient. That's
See, I think,
how my life rolls.
I think you need to put together like a 10-hour loop and just play it all night while you sleep.
I don't need worse nightmares. I've already got...
So, Bruce, one of the things that you didn't bring up is, do you like the character of Sandman?
You know, it's kind of a superficial way to say it, but I don't, just because too many Sandmen out there. I don't like stories where he shows up. The movie here tries to make him seem like, I think, perhaps a deeper character than he ever seemed to be in the comics to me. The idea of him switching between, you know, good and bad and sort of being troubled about it, I think that's a novel concept, but it's just a weird character to use it on. And also, I don't know, man. Who was the person that said, you know, what kind of Chiba was Stan Lee smoking when he decided a guy that could turn into sand was a good villain or hero? Not one of my favorites. I like his shirt, though.
Sonny Chiba's the type.
Yeah.
They're Street Fighter. that's for the nerds.
It's like kung fu stuff, right?
Yeah. More or less.
Samurai Sonny Chiba.
He did some of that stuff. He's got a wide body of work, that Sonny Chiba. Look him up.
Was he in Kill Bill?
Yeah. He was the guy. He was the guy giving the Hanzo sword and everything. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Samurai Sonny Chiba. That's his new name now. I just gave it to him.
It's like, oh, after all these years, I finally got a name. Thank you, Bruce Leslie.
Thank you, random suburban white guy.
So yeah, man, this is number 3 in the Spider-Man series. As we did in Spider-Man 2 not too awful long ago, man. Spider-Man 2 was the high watermark for comic book movies at this point. And I'll be honest, they had an uphill battle for this one because that one was so good at the time. It was almost impossible for this thing to be really good. And then you put on top of that the problems that, let's put it out here in Front Street. Sam Raimi doesn't care for Venom. That was not a fan of that character. So, but the studio said, this is what you have to do. Venom is very popular. Venom's a big giant thing. They still think that to this day for some odd reason. But you got to put it in.
I don't necessarily think it's the studio as a whole. I think maybe it was specifically Avi Arad, and it wasn't that Venom's really popular. It's that he knew some kids that said they liked Venom. It was this really weird focus group of like a couple of random kids that Avi Arad ran into or something weird like that. I think it's even worse when the story plays out. And if that's not true, then the fiction's better than the truth, so we'll stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, Avi Arad talking out of his butt, though, doesn't really sound like that much of a surprise to me.
But, the sad thing is Venom really doesn't get fair treatment, and neither does Flint Marko, because the way that everything was just jammed in. And also it was kind of like a last-minute note from the studio. Oh, and by the way, we got to have Gwen Stacy in this one. She's really shoehorned into this one, and it kind of shows. Her character just sort of shows up, doesn't really do much, and disappears.
More than any other Raimi Spider-Man movie, you can just feel when there's notes in the script where – it seems like he's going for something. I think that the Sandman is partially responsible for his uncle's death. Like that. I mean,
that's
that part,
harsh. Yeah, that's one of the worst bits.
That is one of the hardest things about this movie. And that was the character where it had the most going for it. In my opinion, it's the only great scene in this movie is when he's trying to reform himself in that sand pit. And go ahead.
Sadly, I think that closing of the loop and making the world a smaller place was a Sam and Ivan idea, that Flint was the one responsible.
I think so too, but I think that it felt like to me where, well, first of all, here is your guideline. If it was even too outlandish for Stan Lee to use, probably don't use that.
Yeah.
So that's part one. Part two is that you can that part of the Sandman being partially responsible for Uncle Ben's death, like that part is terrible, and also doesn't feel like a studio note. It feels like the writers came up with that and thought that was a great idea. But where the studio, it feels like the studio starts coming in is when like, oh, you know what? Since Topher Grace looks a little bit kind of like Tobey Maguire, like he's the perfect cast for this.
Yeah.
And he's not. And it's from people who don't understand the source material, because at some point here, you can tell, oh, we don't really read Spider-Man. What we know of Spider-Man is like the pop culture Spider-Man, which is fine. Like you can make a pop culture Spider-Man, but and keep in mind, guys, like, and I know that you both know this, but I'm talking to the HMPers, is that before this movie came out, this was probably the highest expected movie ever. Yeah. Where like the expectations to this were like Force Awakens level, holy crap, I can't wait for this to come out, because it was just getting progressively better. And even though now I don't find Venom to be one of the most interesting Spider-Man villains, at the time I did. At the time because I was still suffering from that, Todd McFarlane is pretty great, like that stuff. Yeah. And so Venom was one of my favorite villains at that point. And hearing that he was going to be in it and that whole storyline was going to happen, it was just like, are you kidding me? How much better could this movie possibly be? And so it's not that this movie is bad, which it is, because this movie is very bad. But the reason why it gets wailed on is because the expectations were so unbelievably high for this thing.
And, I'm going to just say that I don't have any problem with Venom. I don't necessarily like how he's portrayed in the movie, but I don't even see Venom as something that kind of had, a flash in the pan. And then I don't see Venom as the same as Spawn. Like, I think later on we all looked back and realized Spawn was not as good as we thought it was in the comics. Right. I think Venom holds up. I love McFarlane's art on Venom. I love the introduction of all those moist textures to the character. I still think that stands up. But the movie is not Todd McFarlane's Spawn. I mean, Todd McFarlane's Venom at all.
No, and here's a question for you. So this is how they introduce Venom, is that this thing from outer space lands in the park.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Where did it come from?
Well, it
Never
looks
you mind.
like it's... All I know is the meteor lands in the park, and then somehow Flubber comes out and climbs on the moped, and then Flubber turns into Venom.
Where it, awaits on the back of his moped for, 2-3 days?
Yeah, there's a lot of, unconnected dots there with Venom, or with the symbiote, or whatever you want to call it. Not to mention how crazy the whole thing gets, that he's like, okay, I go to a university that we have to assume has a large science department, and I'm just going to get the physics professor to look at it, who, by the way, Dr. Connors was never a physics professor in the comics, but they go out of their way to change the character into a physics professor, and then it's a weird, meaningless change that actually hurts the scene more than if they just kept him as this person working on limb regeneration.
And horrible three movies, nary a word about the lizard.
They were holding that one for part 6, I read. Now, something that people don't usually mention when they talk about this movie is the fact that it made $890 million. This outperformed the first 2 Spider-Man movies at the box office, which makes it a weird Hollywood rarity that they let a franchise that profitable, every movie making more than the one before, and they pulled the plug before it had a chance to falter. You just don't see that now.
Well, isn't the reason because of the cast?
Well, the reason was because Raimi departed the project. The cast was still on board.
Yeah, cast was still on board now, and it's really interesting though, because most of that gross that you're talking about there came from outside sources. So, for example, the budget for this thing was $258 million, only made $336 here in the U.S. So while that's profitable, it's not really up where they probably wanted it to be as far as U.S. numbers go.
But it was close to $600 million international.
Yeah, international.
So that's
fine.
still big numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $800 million for the original Spider-Man. Probably broke down 400 and 400.
But I think that was one of the big problems. But yeah, if you go and you kind of listen to some of it, and Raimi was, because I listened to the commentary for this as well as just watched it. And we talk about it in the other Spider-Man movies as well in our reviews there, that at some point he really wanted to do Vulture. And we'd always heard the story, and I think we heard the story post him kind of being, let go from that, was that he wanted John Malkovich to be in there. Now, according to this commentary, one of the earlier, even before that idea, was actually to have Ben Kingsley in as the Vulture.
Yeah, he was briefly cast as the Vulture in this movie before they threw away that plot line.
But I think Bruce is right. The big thing is this came down to, the studio saying this is what we want to do, and Raimi just saying that's not what I want to put out.
And I mean, Warner Brothers didn't let that stop him. Once Burton flew, they got that Schumacher guy. But I guess Sony, man, I have to give them some kind of props rather than keep the most profitable franchise in their history at that time going. They rebooted it with Andrew Garfield.
They'll just do what they continue to do, which is just, forget it, reboot it. Forget it, reboot it.
Okay, we can't get Raimi. Who's next? Just find somebody whose name is Spider-like. Is there a web guy out there?
Poor guy.
But anyway, we can poke a lot of fun now because they've come out on top with Spider-Man Homecoming. But I'm still curious if the box office on Spider-Man Homecoming is going to top Spider-Man 3. I haven't checked it lately, but that's a question that you kind of ought to be asking yourself.
It doesn't matter. No, really.
It matters as a trivia.
I mean, it really doesn't matter, though, because it's not about the film, what it makes specifically now. It's about what it'll do over time, right? So even if box office right now, it's going to probably land where, 600?
Oh, it's already sitting at 700. I just looked it up. So it's already sitting at 700. So it's doing pretty good.
Well, I mean, now, for example, For example, this, and of course, Box Office Mojo is always good with the kind of team ups here. 38-day total for Homecoming is $306 million. This is all domestic, of course. 38-day total when Guardians 2 came out was $366. So I mean, it's doing pretty well.
Oh yeah.
So there's no slump over there.
That is true. That is true, man. Doing well. But I just always like to point out whenever nothing does better than Spider-Man 3 because people consider that a bomb, which it was not a financial bomb. No, I don't think there's any way you can spin it that it was a financial bomb.
Not in the overhaul, no.
No. So let's get to the part that everybody makes fun of, just so we can get past it.
Okay.
The dancing sequence.
Yes, let's get to that.
I mean, it's the part that everybody makes fun of, and it's the part that immediately comes to mind for me anyway whenever I think of this movie. And it's even like it's bad. It's just a bad movie. And this is in particular is a bad scene. And my buddy today actually brought something up that I had never thought about before, which is that this is basically like a Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movie in the middle here. I mean, his haircut is an emo haircut, but his moves are Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
But let's make this clear. Tobey Maguire is no Fred Astaire.
No.
And I think my problems with it aren't so much the concept of putting something weird like that in the middle of this movie. Tobey doesn't execute very well, and it's just not his. It's not in his wheelhouse, I guess you could say, and it shows. And I think that Sam Raimi recognized that it shows and that Tobey just isn't convincing doing this, because when he's walking down the sidewalk shooting the guns and buying his slick black suit, you see in the background, if you watch it, every time a woman is anywhere near, they stray away from him and give him this disgusted look like, man, this guy is awful. This guy, like, it's awesome to just go back and watch and see how Raimi directs every female extra in the background to just be appalled at how Tobey Maguire's acting, instead of doing, the classic, like, Nutty Professor kind of thing where all of a sudden the women are all into him when he's like this. And we're like, come on, Tobey's not convincing anybody. This is just showing us he's full of himself, but he's not fooling anybody on the street.
Did you see the internet version where somebody put that together and took out the music and all they have is the ambient sound? It's fantastic.
That's really good.
It's just him looking around and like just the street sounds. People look at him going, and you just hear like just little light clap and just.
And there's part of me giving Sam
so
Raimi
sad.
the credit, but there's also part of me that wonders, like, if they just filmed Tobey Maguire acting like that on the sidewalk, if that wouldn't be the genuine reaction people had that were passing by. Like, maybe that's candid reactions they're capturing.
Well, Bryce Dallas Howard mentioned it in the commentary. She just goes, "Why is every single person in New York absolutely gorgeous?"
Do you think that people recognize Tobey Maguire when he walks down the street? I wonder.
If he walks down the street like that, I would.
Sure.
Shucking and jiving
I
over
don't
here.
know. I would probably it would be one of those things where I would sort of recognize him, but I would call him the wrong person's name.
Mr. DiCaprio, punch.
I don't think I'd go that far afield, but I might give him a, hey, Jake Gyllenhaal or something like that.
But now interesting you mentioned that, because we'd kind of mentioned before about how, like, there were some possibilities of kind of strike downs and stuff on this Spider-Man on account of maybe the cast didn't get along too much. It was interesting listening to the commentary because it felt like, I don't know if it was kind of faked, but even Kirsten Dunst was just kind of like, it was nice everybody kind of getting back together. And, Toby and I have like a really good, relationship, so we can kind of see where each other's going and all that stuff. And then she threw in a nice little, like, and we also know where to push each other's buttons. I was like, whoa.
I do not believe that girl was really overjoyed to be working with Toby.
It just, it seemed like that last little touch in there was just kind of like hey, and we kind of fought a little bit too.
In fact, you said that she was in London on the commentary.
Mm-hmm.
I get the idea that she had no reason to be in London until she found out the date for the commentary recording and flew there just to ensure she could phone
what's
it
it
in.
called? Got a vacation. Yeah, that's the ticket.
I'm working on London Fog 3 Shades of Fog.
But it almost sounds like one of those ones where, like, they have like a group commentary and most of the people are in the same room, but then they have like another person or another group, and then that group is actually kind of separate, and then they just kind of pipe their stuff in if and where they can put it?
Sure, man.
I wouldn't have been
the
shocked.
magic of podcasting can apply to commentaries, I'm sure.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But, just in general, and this isn't a statement about Kirsten Dunst, though maybe on some level she plays into it, but just as a rule, I've never liked Mary Jane. You were asking me, do I like Sandman? Well, I can say I've never liked Mary Jane. In the comics, I've always preferred Gwen, and a big part of that is probably because she died before I ever read comics, so she was always like this thing in history, something I never experienced firsthand, and you kind of elevate them to another level. It's kind of like the rocker that dies after his debut album, or the athlete that dies prematurely, so you always wonder what great things he could have been. Yeah. So maybe there was some of that mystique around Gwen Stacy, but I've always been Team Gwen over Team Mary Jane, and in this movie I found myself feeling very much that way.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. There's something off about this. Well, specifically about Bryce Dallas Howard. This is one of the weird things where, do you remember that Bryce Dallas Howard was in everything for about 10 minutes there, where she was in, she's in this movie, she's in that M. Night Shyamalan movie,
Village,
and and back to back, those things were awful, and so it became a thing for me anywhere where it's like, that woman's a jinx, she's a jinx.
And man, geez, there's a part of me that's just despicable and no good and worthless. And that part comes out and says, you know what? If her dad wasn't Ron Howard, none of us would know who she is. And that prevents me from probably enjoying her like I would if her name was something else, And I know that's not a fair thing to do, because look at, second celebrity generations have given us greats like Nick Cage. I shouldn't hold it against her. She can't help who her father is. But there's that part of bias, bitterness in me.
I'll go so far as to say I like Bryce Dallas Howard, and I enjoy The Village. So there.
Oh, I like The Village, but I never saw the Chick in the Pool movie.
It's I don't want to say it's his weakest, because you got The Last Airbender, and that's, woo, boy, oh, howdy, that's no good.
I kind of like
The
that.
Happening.
I like The Happening more than I like The Happening. Yes.
Really, you like?
Oh my goodness!
I don't love it, but I like it. I like it.
Yeah, they could call that movie Stuff.
Stuff. Now, one of the notes I read also said that, and you might be able to answer this for me, Sean. You understand? I'm a simple caveman movie watcher. You understand?
Yes. Okay. You're smarter than Adam and I put together like 3 times. But please go ahead.
Well, I saw them say that since sand was a possible hazard in scenes where actors had to be buried, that they used ground up corn cobs as a substitute. But what property of corn cobs makes them safer than sand?
Well, it's not that it's safer, it's how it looks on camera. And so that's why you use ground up corn for sand on camera, because it's more photogenic, but it looks like sand.
And then when you need to clean up, you just bring in like the animals.
That's right.
And they eat up the ground up corn.
Bring in the pigs.
No, cows, man. You got to bring in cows and horses to eat up that corn.
It's not a safety issue, though, Bruce. It's okay. It's a photo thing.
Now, the photo thing makes sense to me because it's nice and yellow, dried corn. It's going to look kind of cool, and it's probably going to be easier to manipulate than sand. But I saw somewhere where they made the claim that it was for safety concerns, and that made no sense to me. It's like if you're going to be crushed to death under sand or crushed to death under ground up corn, I don't know what the difference is.
There is none.
This episode of Hero Movie Podcast brought to you by the National Corn Association. Corn, eat on up.
Now, I do like this scene where it's like kind of at the very beginning, without much warning, Harry Osborn just swoops down on his snowboard and starts attacking Peter out of the blue because he wants to kill him to get revenge for his father's death. And they kind of needed to address this early because this is sort of where things were left at the end of Spider-Man 2. And they either had to address it or it was going to be glaringly obvious that they didn't. But the way they resolved it with soap opera amnesia, I don't know if I was into that.
Man.
Franco was in soap operas, so it kind of counts.
Man, and I believed 100% that he was on pain medication for the rest of the movie because he just had that quality about him. Like, it was convincing acting.
Yes, it was the Franco checkout where
I truly believe this was a man who suffered a head injury and took pain pills.
Well, I pop 3 Xanax before I go to work, and then it's just, hey, have some cotton candy and look at a girl and smile for a while.
And plot problems are there, but there's no denying that Raimi really shoots good aerial fight scenes. And we get treated to one pretty early on here with Harry Osborn ambushing Peter. And it's kind of cool to see him fighting in the, kind of the corny shirt and tie and everything instead of the Spider-Man suit. It's kind of nice.
It is, but that Green Goblin, Harry Osborn, it's so dumb. It looks so bad. I don't mean the fight choreography. That part's great, but the costuming, the design of I'm basically on a Back to the Future 2 hoverboard. Like, that's all ridiculous.
And the way they give him the mask, I really feel like they were trying to sell the snowboarder look or something.
Exactly. Extreme Green Goblin.
Yeah, it was 2007 and they were giving us 1997.
It's a little late.
I cut you off there, Adam. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, like, where's the alley in which this takes place? This never-ending alley. It felt like that first Harry Potter movie.
Deserted alley in the most populous city in America that goes on forever.
Forever. It felt like that, like when they're under the stands and the Quidditch thing in Harry Potter. That's what it felt like, because they just kept going and going and going. At least that was a circular, like, thing, right?
Oh, you just got me picturing James Franco playing Quidditch on that hoverboard now. I like that idea.
Oh, my gosh. I'd watch that.
Oh, heck yeah. And But, after all this kind of wraps up, then we get to see Flint Marko has escaped from prison. No explanation. We just see him in his orange jumpsuit running away from the police. He goes to visit his daughter who's dying of cancer. And this is kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like when somebody just offers to let you have only one Oreo. Because you really like that Oreo, but man, you kind of wish you could have had the whole box, Because they're showing us that there's a gem of a really, really good story potentially here with this whole dynamic of the daughter dying of cancer, and he's only a criminal because he's trying to help his daughter. But, that gets lost so we can have a whole bunch of Eddie Brock, Topher Grace, jazz dancing, and, I don't know, models selling copiers with their really, really conservatively dressed bodies.
Well, that's that's actually what I was trying to say earlier on the show, and I just kept losing my train of thought, is that the Marko stuff, the Sandman stuff, is really great in this until there's the reveal of, oh, hey, this guy tried to kill this guy's partially responsible for killing your uncle. Like, everything else about this thing is pretty cool. The subway fight with Sandman's great. There's a lot that's really good about this, and Thomas Hayden Church is a really good actor. And I think this is probably right after Sideways when he gets cast for this. Yes, I'm going to guess.
You are right. His star is shining super bright, and this is his big paying role. This is the money role to follow up the artistic role or whatever. And then after this, I don't know that he had a whole lot come his way, which is too bad because I do like the guy, big ears and all. But it kind of feels like this is the sort of role you follow up something like Sideways with. You got to strike while the iron is hot, is what Huey Lewis in the News once said.
Well, he was in a hot movie called John Carter, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. We all know how that goes.
I worked with him on the movie Max.
Yeah, there you go. That's one
easy A movie.
Yes,
awesome.
And he's got this thing where he has no voice modulation at all. So it's 3:00 in the morning. We're in a neighborhood shooting a scene. And as before camera starts rolling, he's like, "So what are we doing here?" And just waking up the neighborhood.
Oh man, it makes me think that he didn't even realize he was on a show when they made Wings. He just kept showing up and talking.
Well, I was going to mention that I love Wings. Wings was like a show that I loved watching growing up. But here's
Superman and Sandman in the same show.
There you go. But to me, the big thing was, I just like, as much as the character is interesting and what they're doing with him is interesting, and while I think he is a good actor, I don't think he's acting spectacularly well in this, or at least they don't give him enough to do, in my opinion. I guess that's really what I mean.
Hey,
he's given my favorite kind of performance in this movie, actually, where he's not tilting, he's not showing you his hand. He's not an emoter. He's not an emotive actor. And so it's in his eyes what he's doing. And so I enjoy that kind of performance when done well. There's some people who call that lazy acting, but I prefer that kind of acting, especially in a comic book movie like this, especially when there's like 15 other people in it and everyone's screaming and cackling at the same time.
Well, let's talk about his creation scene. You know, when Flint Marko becomes Sandman, when he's running away from the cops, falls down just with, unexpectedly because it's dark, falls down into some pit that we're given no further description about, and lands in the and lands in the pile of sand that for some reason scientists are spending what have to be billions of research dollars to demolecularize sand.
I don't know midnight, at like midnight or some such nonsense. Why it's in the dark of the cover of night, we'll never know.
I don't know what their end game is here. Like, are they planning to solve the world's energy crisis with radioactive sand? I don't know. But we don't need to know because he falls in, the generator kicks on, and I got to tell you, this is Dr. Manhattan's origin that they're showing us.
Oh, hey, yeah, I never put it together before. You're right, man.
Even trying to put his body back together and failing at first and all that. I mean, they're giving us pretty much Dr. Manhattan's creation here.
Nice grab, Bruce Leslie.
It's one of those things that's always on my mind is the creation of Dr. Manhattan.
Is how does this rip off Watchmen?
There's not a day that goes by that I don't tell some random stranger I meet all about the origin of Dr. Manhattan. People love me. I'm a much sought after house guest.
People love me. That's literally what you just said. People love me.
But I do like it. Throw out all the why in the heck stuff, but you just get to see him torn apart. I like the visuals. Raimi's always good at working with effects people to do some cool molecular level effects, and I love the sand penetrating his pores. Then we just see all of his cells inside of his body becoming silica based instead of carbon based, essentially, when it all gets spiky. I think they give you great visuals worthy of a comic book splash page, but like I said, I couldn't miss that. This is very different from the Sandman's comic book creation, which, classic Stan Lee, he falls in sand and it's radioactive. Now he's Sandman. This tries to go a little deeper, but it ends up being Dr. Manhattan's. But it's executed well here.
I agree. I also like, one of the things that we haven't even mentioned yet is that this is the best that Spider-Man looks in these movies too. Because in the first movie it is so bad, it's like Matrix Reloaded bad. But by the third one, they kind of nail it. Like, this is the best he looks in the Raimi movies, in my opinion.
And I have to agree. I like the way the black suit looks as black suited Spider-Man as well. It's different from the comic book black suit. I kind of like it because it's essentially just a color scheme change on the movie suit. Though we'll have a different story once he becomes Venom, and then they have to try to explain that big mouth with all the sharp teeth. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. The other part too, Bruce. So growing up, were you when you think of Spider-Man, do you think of him as in the black costume? Because that's how I first started actually reading Spider-Man comic books, is that they had the black suit.
Funny you should ask, because I bought the actual issue of Secret Wars where Spider-Man gets the black suit off of a spinner rack. So I felt like that suit was made for my kind of generation, the same generation that you belong to. But I also got really excited because it was kind of an event when the red and blue suit came back. And also there were always two Spider-Man titles. There was the Amazing Spider-Man and Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man had the black and white suit, but Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, always maintained the more classic suit. So they were always both there. For me, it was kind of cool, because I felt like this suit was almost created just for me. And then when you hear the story, it was essentially created by somebody just like me who got paid either $26 or $52. It was some really specific low number of dollars for the idea of giving Spider-Man a black and white suit. It was like a write-in contest they had.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, but I think of Spider-Man in the black suit as an anomaly, and that's kind of what makes it cool, But the Secret Wars action figure was Spider-Man in the black suit.
Yeah. And that's the one that I grew up with, the first bunch of years where I was reading Spider-Man on a monthly basis. He had the black suit on.
But, everything is falling apart for Mary Jane in this movie. And I guess, we're supposed to feel bad for Mary Jane that things aren't going well for her? I mean, I think what kind of narcissistic sort of person believes they deserve to be a Broadway star? I mean, you kind of know the deal when you're going in. Like, it's a crapshoot, man. You give it your best shot, you aim for the sun, but chances are you're not going to make it. But are we supposed to feel sorry for her that rather than being a mega celebrity that she has to be regular?
Well, let's get into this then, including that. Let's get into this, or as I like to call this, Buttholes the movie, because that's what everyone in this movie is.
That would be an awesome title. Spider-Man 3, Buttholes.
Everyone is a complete and utter jerk in this movie. Mary Jane is she's all up in her head and just like, well, I'm supposed to be great. It's called, darling, you're not going to get to the top on one big thing. These things happen. It's just like, if you can't handle that in your line of work, this is not the line of work you need to be going in. Peter's a jerkwad because he doesn't know how to, empathize with her and just kind of, get her back on track as best you can. Then he goes so far as to kiss another girl, and then it's like, what gives? And then the next thing he does is propose. It's like, you jackass, what's wrong with you?
Hey, the one person who was not a butthole was Bruce Campbell, the maitre d', because he went out of his way to accommodate Peter for no good reason.
His role was fantastic. He was the only genuinely nice person in this film.
Especially, I mean, Spider-Man doesn't just kiss another girl. He kisses her in public, makes the front page, and of course, it's that iconic kiss from Spider-Man.
And it ain't just like she planted it on him. This cat invited that. He just goes, "Hey, you know it'd be a good thing? You ought to kiss me right now." And then he's like, "What's wrong? Why are you upset, baby? I just made another girl kiss me in front of the world."
Raimi should have just added a little scene where Peter's mumbling, "More tongue, more tongue."
And then it looks like, I don't understand what your problem is. You are an idiot.
First off, we all agree Gwen is without blame here because she doesn't know who Spider-Man is. Gwen is genuinely nice here. I don't really think Gwen ever does anything. Like, even when she realizes what's going on, she apologizes to Mary Jane. For what it's worth, Gwen, and I'm always Team Gwen, so maybe I'm an apologist, but she doesn't do anything out of line in this whole movie. Other than dating Eddie Brock, who's kind of a jerk.
She's fine, but where did this model thing come from out of nowhere? Was that just an excuse to get her in the skyscraper? It had to be. Could have been anything else.
She died before she got out of high school in the comics, so I don't think she ever made it as a model there, though Mary Jane was on a soap opera. That seemed oddly bizarre to me. Though I do like the Eddie Brock being like, you had one date and all of a sudden it's just like, yeah, I'm dating your daughter right now. That's where that's going. And you find out later it's just like, yeah, we only had coffee. Man, there's also the totally relatable argument where Mary Jane goes to Peter's apartment and she's arguing, or not really arguing, wanting to talk to him about her failed debut on Broadway. The very first thing I ever tried in my life wasn't a massive success. But anyway, and he's trying to talk, well, I can relate. And she's like, no, this isn't about you. This is about my career. It's more important than you. Then he gets a call about a crime, and it's all of a sudden, no, I'm more important than your career. Here's how things go in importance. My career, me, you and your career somewhere below those things. I mean, that's kind of relatable.
Spider-Man Buttholes the movie, I'm telling you.
And by the way, forget Gwen Stacy, forget Mary Jane. Why doesn't Peter just start dating Ursula? She'd make him happy.
She would, man. And I love Ursula. This is like the most that we get from that character. She's in part 2 a little bit. But I like her in this one. And I like his, just talking on the phone and kind of just go, are there raisins in this? How about you put some raisins in it? How about you go make some with raisins in them? Where's the milk at?
One of the best performances, including Seabiscuit, that I've ever seen from Tobey Maguire is when he's on that phone taking advantage of Ursula. He's like, milk, give me milk. I mean, he does everything perfect there.
He's on the phone. I'm listening to you, baby. Whatever.
But I do love that, man.
The thing that I love about this actress is that they basically cast her as like the ugly girl and everything. But here's the thing: is that she's like movie ugly.
Yeah.
So if you saw this girl in real life, you would be like, wow, that is a really, really pretty girl.
Yeah.
But because it's movies, it's like, look at this ugly creature.
Not only do I see that she's a lovely woman, I think she's even pretty when they try to ugly her up here. And I think she's probably just a little out of Toby's league if Toby and she were just regular people and not like movie stars.
No, I think you're definitely right there. It's just like you get her out of that, Russian gulag of an apartment she's in or whatever is going on. And
Plus, she'd have a really cool father-in-law. I kind of like her dad.
I like how he kind of lightened up a little bit because all in Spider-Man 2, he's up Toby's butt, left and right. And then, but though it does show, just talk back to your landlord, they'll respect you.
No, Peter is good boy. If he's having problems, we need to help.
But that's also That's also a good sign though too. But at the same time, he looks at him and just goes. He realizes that he is a good kid, and if he is like stabbing out at him and stuff, it's because something really is wrong. Because he knows that that's a good kid.
It would have been better. For all we know, he has an alien symbiote in his body. We need to give him a space. But one thing I didn't like is, Ursula clearly crushing on Peter. The term people use now is shipping on TV shows. I want to ship so hard Peter and Ursula, but I don't like how Ursula is she's rooting for Mary Jane and Peter to get back together. That makes no sense to me. No. She should really be trying to move in while the creature is wounded, That
almost shows how sweet that girl is, too, at the same time where she's just like, oh.
Or maybe she could be so sweet that she realizes that Peter doesn't need to be with this narcissistic turn her on a whim she-devil that's known as Mary Jane in this movie.
They said they couldn't hear me past the first row. That's ridiculous. You were in the first row, jackass. Oh, that's a good point.
Man, but yeah, it's like I said, come on. It's you're aiming for the stars. You can always say, hey, I took my shot. But you know what? I can still make a pretty good living in this jazz club because even though maybe I'm not a Broadway good singer, I'm a darn good jazz club singer. But no, she can't be optimistic, which would make me like her more. She sounds to me like she's not even going to audition for anything ever again because she tried out on day one of American Idol and didn't become a star, so now she's just going to cry and quit.
And she's super mopey about it, too. She's just like, well, I got another job at a jazz club where I'm headlining the thing. Shut up.
Man, I believe for a lot of good creative types, you got to be forged in fire, man. You got to suffer for a while to make it worthwhile when you get to the top.
Don't I know it, friend?
And when I'm 87 years old and finally make it, I'm going to be happy and then die.
Once I get to that second rung, boy, you watch out.
I would be like Larry David in real life, where he was so worried about Seinfeld being successful that he was afraid he was going to get cancer because his life was going too well. That's an actual true story.
I believe it. Now, I want to live in a world where the police operate like they do in Spider-Man 3, where they're like, we need you guys to come down to the station. All right, now here's the deal. We totally messed up that whole homicide investigation about your husband. Turns out this guy didn't do it. But we got good news. We had the guy that did it in custody, but he escaped. So sorry, folks. Just thought we'd call you down and ruin your day without really anything of value to tell you.
It's just like, and when Peter's really upset, you just kind of go, yeah, you should be. You should be very upset about this.
And they say that Flint Marko confessed in prison to his cellmate. So I'm imagining he confessed at least like 3 days ago, because he's been, he escaped from prison, turned into Sandman. It's had to be at least 3 days. So why are you waiting till now to call us and tell us all this, Also, it's an ongoing investigation. I'm not sure that just calling people down and talking about it in a nice open space where there's clearly people walking back and forth in the background is the way you handle that either.
So what they need to do then is they ask the nice officer who tells them that they've lost the guy who killed Uncle Ben. They have to go. So where is the nearest civil lawyer from here, from where I'm standing? And then they don't have to worry about money anymore. But here's the thing. If they settle out of court, if we've learned anything from Making a Murderer, it's this: leave town. Don't stay in the town with the cops you just sued for a bunch of money.
Yeah, exactly. Or even if they'd had something like Captain Stacy saying, those jerks in City Hall are going to take my badge for this, but you saved my Spider-Man saved my daughter, and I just think Aunt May needs to know. I got to connect a few more dots there, but have something to explain why now, other than this is some exposition we desperately need to tie up this loose end that nobody considered loose. But I love the way they handled it. In a facetious way.
We need to make it more complicated and have more crap going on. What do you think? That sounds like a great plan, boss. Let's put that in there.
Well, it's the weird thing. It's the weird thing where they overcomplicate certain plot points, and then there's other parts where it's like, you know what, we're just gonna let that go.
Yeah. Yep. But we do get to see, Sandman sort of die. I thought he was dead the first time I watched this. I didn't realize that he was going to come back to life from the mud. But Peter tries on the black costume, finally gives in to the symbiote and goes to the sewer or something and confronts Sandman and bursts out all the water, which is kind of the classic comic book way you defeat Sandman, is you hose him down. Yeah. And then he goes away, and I think maybe he's going to be done. Maybe he's going to come back somehow. But they give no explanation for why he's suddenly able to reconstitute himself, because he's still soaking in the water and climbs out. Like, they could have at least had him dry out on the sidewalk or something first. It's a big logic flaw there.
Well, there's a lot of, it's funny, man, because what you're reminding me of now is that one of the things that makes me crazy about this movie is that the answer to a lot of your questions, like the question you just asked, is the answer is literally because it's a comic book movie. And that's not right. That's not the right answer. In order for us to believe your crap, it has to work within your own universe. The rules have to apply to your own universe. And there's so many things in this movie where over and over again, it's just like, what?
Yeah, that's what people fail to understand. You can make any rules you want in this kind of fantasy world, but you have to have some kind of rules, and you have to stick to them. If the rule is raisins that have been microwaved too long turn you into a demon, then that needs to be A, the only way you're turned into a demon, and B, everybody who eats a microwaved raisin needs to turn into a demon. But they're like, okay, so this guy's going to get a microwave peach, and this person's going to eat a microwave raisin and not do it. Consistency is what we're looking for.
Well,
that's right.
Write it down, everybody. Microwave raisin. You didn't think you were going to hear it on today's show, but by George, you did.
And then they got to start kicking this Eddie Brock stuff into high gear here. And Eddie manages to get the staff job with a fake photo and venom-infused, symbiote-infused Peter figures out that it's a fake and reveals it and sends Eddie to the church crying. And, of course, Peter's finally decided he has to give up on the symbiote. And this is, fairly comic book accurate, where he's up in the top of the church using the bells because the symbiote has that sonic sensitivity that I think is explained a little better in the comics, but they do okay with it.
It's all right.
And then it falls down into the sanctuary where Eddie Brock's praying for Peter Parker to die, and he gets the suit, and it's like his prayer has been answered. That's actually, take the actors out of it. I like it because, if you don't know, if you're being faithful to the comic books and it's not good, that's better than trying something on your own and it being not good. Does that make sense?
Yes, completely. Mm-hmm. But don't forget, Bruce, that him figuring out with the Sonic stuff, I mean, that is an arc in its own. Where I can't remember how many issues it is, but it's over a series of issues. It's not something that happens in 20 minutes.
Yeah, but nobody wanted more elements in this movie.
You are right. Very, very good point.
Now, something interesting that I found out listening to commentary of all of them, and I don't know to what degree, my guess is probably not super big, but Topher Grace, comic book fan. And
cool.
he had read some of this stuff before, and he actually had some, it seems that he at least had some input as far as Venom goes, because a lot of this movie was not really written completely when they started on this thing. So
you don't say.
Yeah, it seems weird, right?
So Topher Grace did know that Eddie Brock was like this muscle-bound guy in the comics, right? I guess maybe this is a buff Topher Grace.
They made up with it with Frosted Tips.
Like, for all I know, Topher Grace hit the gym hard for 6 months and was shooting up with horse testicles or something.
He looks like
maybe this is as buff as he can get.
He looks like he's a little bit bigger than the Eric Freeman from that 70s show. He looks a little bigger than that.
Yeah, he didn't go full Josh Brolin, though.
No.
Exactly, man. Or even Joel from Wings, man. He's pretty muscled up to play Sandman.
Yeah.
So it's not horrible. It's just not good either.
And there's some shortcuts when Eddie Brock goes to find the Sandman. He's like, "Oh, I looked into you. I know who you are. I know you hate Spider-Man. Hey, how about you help me kill Spider-Man?" They were like, "Okay, we just gotta get this going. We need to wrap this thing up. So let's just have Topher Grace tell Joel from Wings that you know what? Let's just work together for reasons."
And it's hilarious because even with, like, one of the big things with Raimi's Spider-Man, as we've mentioned in our other reviews and stuff, is that Spider-Man's constantly taking off the mask because they want you to see the face, they want you to see the lips move and everything, right? And we finally get Venom, who, within the costume, has a mouth and can move. We still have to have him take the thing off all the time.
And for some reason, they give those horrible, like, gnarly fake vampire teeth to Topher Grace when he's got the Venom mask off. Like, I don't think it's necessary to keep those teeth there.
So dumb.
And couldn't they have done anything to Venom's voice? Because every time you see Venom in the comics and stuff, he's got the regular dialogue box, and then it's got like the little red ring around it to indicate that it's kind of more demony or, you know, different sounding in some way.
Right.
The Venom voice here is the same as his regular voice, pretty much.
I could just hear that conversation with Topher Grace. Okay, so here's the deal. We got a mocap actor. We're going to CG you, and we're getting a voiceover. So here's your check.
Look,
see you later.
It's a twist
So
of
they had to
the
use
dial. It's a twist of the dial on the board, man. Make them sound a little bit something else. That's all.
Yeah, I thought all he ever said was, "I am Venom."
It's not much, but he does have some dialogue, and it's just like you feel like it could be modulated some way.
And just think if they would
Bruce, it would be "We Are Venom."
Yeah, that's right.
Good point.
But I wish they could have just skipped over Eddie Brock and went straight to the Flash Thompson Venom, because Joe Manganiello could be a good Venom.
Yeah, he could. He could.
He could have filled out that suit, boy.
And not only that, but Joe Manganiello is probably 40 in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
But it works, though.
He'd be great.
Yeah, man, he would be good. He would be good.
I just want like a Venom who like has that size and everything to where when you compare him up to Spider-Man, it seems like a real threat. You know?
Yes.
When you got Topher Grace, who's essentially the same size as Tobey Maguire, it doesn't pose that much of a threat to me.
No.
And I know the route they were going. They wanted to go with sort of the evil Peter Parker. So they wanted to make him a lot like Peter Parker in stature and stuff like that. But no, the cool thing about Venom is that he's everything Peter isn't, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But before we run out of time, we got to talk about the most cringeworthy thing in this whole movie. And that's Barnard, the manservant, revealing to Harry Osborn that his dad died by his own hand. And just the way that he says it, man. First off, that actor's delivery. He clearly didn't sign up for a speaking role.
Bill Paxton's father.
God love him, man.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Did not know that.
That is a fact.
Well, God love him, man. I'm happy for him that he got a job and everything, but I feel like they showed up one day and they're like, we promised you wouldn't have to talk, but got some bad news. We got to shore up this plot hole, so we need you to help us out.
I was hired for how I would look in the first movie. No one said you'd have to say words.
That is the delivery, man. That is the delivery. And
I love you, Father. He was a good man.
The writers didn't even try to help him out. I saw that the blade was from his glider. Like Barnard doesn't use the term glider. You know, he would call it something else. He died by his own hand.
He died by the swoop-de-swoop. I saw it through the air. Like, what are you talking about?
That made me thing he rode around town on killed him. I tell you.
But that's
the doohickey did the stabby to your dad.
But that's one of the big problems with this entire thing. Really, is like there's so many weird performances when you take them as a singularity. It's all strange. Everybody from Toby to Barnard to Franco, everyone has this weird sort of thing where it seems like they're under the guise of a hypnotist.
And I do think at the end, at the climax, that Sam Raimi in a way got his way, because he's still planning to come back at this point as this is wrapping up, and he manages to kill Venom. Like, there is a point of no return ending for Venom. But the guy he likes, Sandman, gets to float away potentially to return in the future,
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh man, we got it. No, can't do that. For better or for worse. So we shall."
And they
see.
really tried to shoehorn a theme of forgiveness into this, but it's come on. It's like trying to put a tuxedo on a donkey. You can do it, and it's adorable, but you don't need to.
Adorable donkey tuxedo. Speaking of things that are adorable, we have to figure out in this program here of how this movie relates back to the most adorable man in cinema history, Sylvester Stallone.
Why, thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement.
Oh.
Here's the list of credits. Blade Trinity, Elektra, the Jessica Alba Fantastic Four, X-Men The Last Stand, Punisher Warzone, and Spider-Man 3. Now, this guy has either produced or executive produced every one of these movies. This man is a monster, and he must be stopped immediately, and his name is Kevin Feige.
I didn't know that's where this was going.
Oh, great.
Kevin Feige is a name that even passing comic book fans know, but how much do we know about this guy? He must have some massive skeletons in his closet, right? No, he does not. Everyone seemed to breathe a sigh of relief when Ike Perlmutter was pushed out of the way in favor of the MCU running through Kevin Feige. Everyone, by all accounts, say Kevin Feige is a fair guy you can trust, and everyone seems to like him. If this week's Stallone connection was Ike Perlmutter, then man, we'd have a ton of stories to talk about. People hate that guy the same way fat people hate hearing the phrase gluten-free. People hate Ike Perlmutter like straight guys hate Madonna. People hate Ike Perlmutter like old people hate desegregation. Now, after doing some digging, I found that Feige's grandfather was a TV producer in the 50s, producing shows like Guiding Light and As the World Turns, but nothing else, really. I haven't found anything on Kevin Feige. The problem is I'm a comedy writer, not a detective, which really sucks, because I've always fancied myself a little bit of like a David Addison on Moonlighting style detective. Hey, you know what they need to remake? Anything but the TV show Moonlighting. Anyway, Kevin Feige went to USC, started as the personal assistant to Laura Donner Shula, working on movies like You've Got Mail and Volcano, and in 2000 was hired on to Marvel. The first movie he produced was X-Men. And while he's had some missteps, looking at you, Man-Thing, most people, myself included, think that every movie franchise could use a Kevin Feige. But man, Spider-Man 3 really is a suck fest. You know what doesn't suck? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. That is a solid movie, and Kevin Feige was a producer on it. But you know what 80s movie star is also in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2? Howard the Duck. And Sylvester Stallone. There's really nothing more out there about Kevin Feige, which means he's either fiercely private or there's nothing to report. Maybe he's one of those guys that just works and goes home and that's it. Or maybe he spends his free time pretending he's a hobo, riding the rails and taking down the Eileen Wuornos of the world, hobo justice style. You won't kill another trucker, lady. So says hobo Kevin Feige, and he leaves in the night. So there you have it, Topher and Bryce Dallas, this week's Stallone connection. Now let's get into reviewing, because Game of Thrones is on, Adam. Games of Thrones is on.
I've never heard of it. All right, here on Hero Movie Podcast, we have our own silly little thing. It's called the Patented Robin Rating System. And if you'd like to check that out, go to Facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there at the top of the page, and be one of the 2,000 plus people that have liked us, and do us a favor, throw that thumbs up on there. Bruce, where does Spider-Man 3 fall on the H&P Robin Rating System for you, sir?
Before I rewatched it for this podcast, I remember thinking this movie doesn't deserve the derision it receives. I've seen it many times, but not usually beginning to end. I generally caught it in chunks that I could enjoy, but rewatching it in one sitting has soured me a bit. It's not put together well. I do find the jazzy Peter scenes every bit as cringeworthy as other people seem to. I have to plop this movie in the pile of Stephanie Brown's. That's something that I didn't expect to be doing when I pushed play on the old movie player. I thought I was going to be defending this, but it's indefensible. Much like Michael Jordan.
Keenan.
This movie is bad. I kind of like it because they're shooting for the fences with a lot of stuff here, but it just doesn't work. And as I've said a million times, I don't dislike bad movies. I dislike mediocre. So I am going to go a high Stephanie Brown on this. This movie's terrible, but at least they're going for stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's Stephanie Brown's all around. Because you're right. It's not like it's not ungodly bad, but it's not really great either. But it's also not. It's not quite so mediocre bad that it pushes it into the super bad category. I think you're right. But it's definitely, and I went in just like Bruce going, okay, this has got much maligned over the years. There's got to be some way that we can dig ourselves out of this. It's probably not all that bad because Spider-Man 2 was so darn good. Let's just watch this, and it's like, it's tough. It's tough. You know, you have to defend your friends sometimes, and sometimes you just don't want to. And this is a friend you don't want to really have to defend because it's not as good as you want it to be.
A friend you don't want to defend is perhaps no friend at all.
Ooh, sage advice from Bruce Leslie, everybody. So that is it for this week. Again, thank you to our patrons to picking this out for us, man. Closing out the Sam Raimi trilogy and everything. And of course, if you'd like to be one of those people that helps vote on the movie that we watch every single month, why don't you head on down to patreon.com/HMP and join in the fun today, my friends. In the meantime, before we talk about what we're going to be doing next week, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet this week, sir?
Hey, you can go to Amazon. I've got plenty of books still available for folks, man. Those ebooks are never sold out. Funny that way. But, folks have shown me a little support in the past week. I want to say thanks to everybody, man. I noticed a little blip there. And, my numbers are low enough. I notice blips, believe me. So thank you, everybody, for checking out Dragon in the Needles, Dragon in Gallus, the sequel to Dragon in the Needles, and, of course, Chubby Wizard, Wrath of the Manticore. Dragon in the Needles and Chubby Wizard are also both available as audiobooks, and hopefully Dragon in Gallus will be available soon.
Very, very good. Mr. Keenan.
You can find me at Preacher Podcast, Dog Eat Pod, and if you want to get in touch with me on the social medias, find me on Twitter at Hero Movie Sean.
And, of course, the Film Find is back again this week. Episode dropping in probably a couple days. Matt and I are back in the saddle. We're going to be talking about Detroit and also the new Conjuring sequel, prequel kind of deal. Annabelle, whatever the hell the name of the beginning thing is. I forget. It's got some little wacky subtitle there. But we'll be reviewing those on the Film Find as well. Next week, everybody, it is time. It's been building and building and building, and we finally now all the stars are aligned, and we are finally getting The Defenders on Netflix. And we'll be reviewing the first half of that next week, so keep an eye out for that, and then there'll be some other little special things coming after that. So again, we're booked throughout the rest of this year. We got no more empty slots. Defenders starts this Friday, my friend.
Wow. I did not know that.
It is on top of you fast, boy. So get on that, everybody. And so we'll be reviewing the first half of that, and then we'll review the second half a little bit later. So, keep subscribed and all that good stuff. That is it, everybody. Join us next week when we talk about The Defenders. For Sean Keenan, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
Goodbye, Marty and Evie.